Hi everyone, and welcome to this live talk with Change Now and Procter & Gamble. We're very happy to have you here to join us today to talk about laundry. So, a rather bizarre topic, I have to say, when it was first introduced to me. But we're talking about laundry as part of a much broader discussion of what is the environmental impact of consumer goods. So this goes to everything that we use on a day-to-day basis, your shampoo, your cosmetics, the sparkling water you drink, and of course, all the cleaning products we use. So it has a massive impact in terms of carbon emissions and environment. It accounts for around 60% of global emissions, looking at all of these products together. And this footprint, when we really look at it, is the entire value chain. It really goes from the producing company, so looking at the inputs, how the product is made, the distribution, et cetera, and also on the consumer side. So how is it that we as consumers purchase these products? How do we use them? And then how do we dispose of them? And laundry is a particularly interesting case because it really has a very significant impact relative to many of the other products that we use on a day-to-day basis. And it's something that clearly we all use. And so what is very nice about this topic today is that many of the companies that are involved, and today we're talking with Procter & Gamble and Electrolux, which are two companies that have really focused on sustainability and are very active in the sector and are working together to really improve the sustainability in laundry. And so I am very pleased to introduce everyone today. Our speakers are Virginie Elias, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Procter & Gamble. She has been with Procter & Gamble for 30 years, of which 10 years are really focused on sustainability, and is really one of the driving forces behind sustainability becoming part of Procter & Gamble's key business and core business strategy. We have Cecilia Nord, who is the Director of Responsible Sourcing at Electrolux. And she has been also with Electrolux for 25 years and has a big focus on sustainability and on value chain work there. We have John Rivas, who is the Director of Net Zero Transformation at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is an independent third party that is trying to help transform companies and value chains to achieve net zero by 2050. And Heidi Silvestre, who is a glaciologist and the Director of Science Communications at the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, which I have to say is the coolest job that I think I've ever heard of. So I'm going to let her explain that herself, but she is a leading voice in communication with governments, with corporations, with individuals to really explain what is happening in glaciers, the impact of climate change. And so I'd like to start here. With you, Heidi. Can you tell us a bit about your work and what you do as a glacierist?
Thank you so much, Briera, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today, and I'm really honored to take part in this great event. So yeah, what do I do for a living? Well, as a glaciologist, I get to study the impacts of climate change. I study glaciers all across the world, from the Arctic to Antarctica, from the Himalayas to the Alps. And what is fascinating about these icy giants is that they are these incredible barometers of climate change. So for example, when the climate is cold, when there is plenty of snow, glaciers react very quickly and they grow. And we can observe that in the field. And then when the opposite happens, when the climate warms and glaciers receive less snow, more rain, well, glaciers melt, they recede, and this is directly having an impact on us. And today, pretty much all over the world, glaciers are losing ice at extreme rates, something we've never seen before. Even when we try to go back in time over 2-3 millions of years, we've never seen such rapid and extreme changes occurring naturally. So today it's very clear that we know that our activities, mostly our emissions of greenhouse gases, are at the root of the climate crisis. And the reason why we care so much about these glaciers changing is because whatever happens to them is directly impacting us. So for example, when glaciers melt, we can see our sea levels rising globally. We can see our water resources being impacted. We can see the frequency of natural hazards increasing. So really, truly, no one on Earth is immune to this warming and to its consequences. And what's crucial to understand, and this will relate to what we will be talking about today, is that every degree matters in that game of climate change, if I dare say. And in order to really avoid the worst consequences of climate change, we need to respect certain physical realities. For example, ice melts at 0 degrees. This is a physical reality. We cannot negotiate with that. And we do know that in order to avoid irreversible negative consequences, we need to keep global temperatures below 2 degrees, and if we can, below 1.5 degrees. And the difference between the two is actually tremendous. And I'm sure that these temperatures actually ring a bell, because these are the temperature targets of the Paris Agreement that was adopted in my country, in France, back in 2015. So now to the good news. So the good news is that it's not too late to act. And that's very important. We are still in a very short window of time during which we can still work very hard to make sure that global temperatures remain below 1.5 degrees. We're very close. We're at about 1.1 degree. That has increased since the pre-industrial era. But as you can see, there is still a short window of time. So it's not too late. But how can we make this happen? Well, what I try to do is that I try to make sure that the science is easily accessible, understandable to policymakers and to the general public. And policymakers have access to the science. This is not the problem. But the ambition to act is not there yet, even in my country where the climate law is currently being discussed. So truly, we cannot afford to wait for someone else to take a decision on our behalf. We need to take this matter in our own hands. So that means that us, the general public, we still have a huge role to play to fight climate change. And the latest polls reveal that we want the change to happen. We want to make the change. Where do we start? Well, I believe that today we'll hear about potential solutions that we can all apply in our everyday lives.
I hope so, because it's really, when you talk about the numbers like that, it's very personal, right? For each and every one of us, it's our job, but it's also something that is really an impact that we know that we can change or not. And it's a decision that we all get to make as individuals and in the roles that we have and in the companies that we work for. So let's start with that. Now, Virginie, with Procter & Gamble, can you tell me about what sustainability looks like and how have things developed on your end on these last 10 years where you've really built up the agenda of sustainability and getting it front and center in terms of the work that Procter & Gamble is doing?
Thank you, Brea. I thought I had a very cool job, but indeed, after listening to Heidi, maybe when I retire. But what happened in the past 10 years actually has been fascinating at P&G, because sustainability used to be a function, a department. And it has evolved to really be a built-in strategy. It impacts how we innovate, how we build our brands, how we do business planning. It impacts our whole culture. And so the framework that we've developed, it's called Ambition 2030. It's really our compass, to enable and inspire positive impacts across our supply chain, our partnership, our employees, and our brands. And within the brands, we'll talk about brands today, we have a program which is called Brand 2030. And it's nothing less than the reinvention of brand building, which, for a company like us who's kind of invented brand management, it's a big deal. So how it works, our historical model for building brands has been around delivering superiority across 5 vectors, superior product, superior packaging, superior communication, retail execution, and consumer and retailer value. So this is still the basis, but the definition of superiority has broadened to actually include now environmental and social impact as well. So this is why we are now asking all our leadership brands, and Ariel is one, to work on what we call the core fundamentals. And those fundamentals are about innovating on product and packaging to enable responsible consumption, but also leveraging the brand's voice in communication to actively promote sustainable behaviors. We ask them to commit to transparency on ingredients, but also on sharing our science, and to decrease impacts across the whole supply chain. And that's not it. We are asking each of our leadership brands to have a North Star, to define what their North Star is. And the North Star is a long-term commitment that can be environmental or social or both, that fits with the equity of the brand so that it's genuine and authentic and is measurable, and needs to be brought to life with what we call tangible acts over time. And so today we are going to announce one of our first brand North Star. So it's a big day for P&G. It's a big day for the brand building community as well, because as I said, it's about reinventing brands. And maybe if I may say, it's a big deal for the planet, because we are actually not just talking about laundries, we are also pushing boundaries, of what it means to drive positive impacts.
Yeah, no, and this is really, I think it's great that Procter & Gamble is doing this, because the thing about Procter & Gamble, right, is that you're a huge, extremely powerful company. And as you said, it created brands, right? So there's very few companies that have the breadth and the reach that you have as a company. So as a decision to put forward a sustainability agenda, to share it, to build awareness among consumers, the impact is astronomical compared to, say, smaller sustainability brands that are doing very good work but might not have that same reach. And so when you get companies like Procter & Gamble and Electrolux as well that are really leaders in your respective categories, that impact has a huge meaning. And so maybe actually, Cecilia, can I bring you in here to talk about kind of your parallel strategy in Electrolux? How has this looked for you all over the last years in your work on sustainability?
I'd be happy to, Briere, and thanks everyone for having me on here today. I represent Electrolux. Most of you probably have heard the name. We are a 50,000 people company operating under a number of global brands such as Electrolux, Frigidaire, Zanussi, AEG, and we offer household products for consumers in their kitchen and laundry rooms. And we just turned 100 years old in 2019. So we've been around for a long time. We're Swedish, but since we have been around for so long, people do think that they're from wherever they are from, which is kind of nice. So it's at home everywhere. But our journey has also been a long one. We've focused since over 10 years in product efficiency. That's really been our North Star up to now, simply because when we look at things from a scientific perspective, and 85% of our climate footprint is actually in where the products are being used by our consumers. So we have had to look at how to make products more and more efficient. Also, being a Scandinavian company operating in Europe, it's been, of course, very important for us, because in Europe, our consumers are guided by product labeling, which guides consumers to actually making wise choices. But it was time for us to renew our sustainability framework when we turned 100 years old. And we realized that looking out towards the world of tomorrow, it wasn't enough to focus on offering efficient products. We actually had to try to get our consumers to use them in a wise way as well, right? Because it doesn't matter if you have, in this case, a laundry product that offers really cool cycles with a low environmental impact, if the consumers are actually still using the 60-degree cycle, the cotton cycle of their grandmothers, because that's how we tend to act as consumers. So we realized, with that in mind, we had to shift our thinking around a little bit and focus on trying to guide our consumers to make more sustainable choices in the context where they use our products. So we actually still focus on product efficiency, on circularity, on changing and improving materials, which have, of course, a big climate impact. We focus on our operations and have bold targets in place for going carbon neutral in operations by 2030 and throughout our supply chain by 2050. But we also devote now a lot of attention to actually helping our suppliers reduce their impact, our consumers, from reducing their impact connected to how they relate to food, how they store food, how they cook food, and also how they actually choose to eat more sustainably. In the case of laundry, we want to teach them how to care for their clothes in a more sustainable way, whether that is actually washing colder, as we're going to talk about here today, or actually choosing their clothes in a different way, or using other types of cycles that actually reduces the need for wash, perhaps when you don't have a really big need for a thorough wash.
Yeah.
So we've turned it around. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think the consumer part is a huge part of this discussion, and I want to have a much more complete conversation about that, because I think that is a huge challenge, right? Is really choosing a strategy and be able to communicate properly with consumers to understand that there really is a responsibility on the part of all of us, and that it's pretty amazing that actually it's the companies that are really doing a lot of the work and the back work to prepare that for the consumers, and to be able to really clarify how that is an important thing for us. So, okay, I want to get there, but I want to talk a little bit more about the laundry and bring in John here so he can tell us also about what is the work of the World Business Council, and kind of how do you all fit in this picture as an independent third party?
Sure, thanks, Briera. So the World Business Council for Sustainable Development brings together around 200 of the leading companies committed to the sustainability agenda. And Procter & Gamble is a long-standing member of our organization. I lead a global cross-value chain business coalition that is really facilitating the collaboration to accelerate this transition to net zero by 2050. Actually, from next year, it becomes a membership requirement of our organization that all members are able to demonstrate they have credible strategies to get to net zero. So within the project that I run, we have members that we are helping to strengthen their own capabilities, but we also bring together members that want to address some critical innovations that need to happen. And in the same way that Heidi talks about measuring glaciers, it's really important that companies are able to measure carbon in their value chain, understand from a primary data perspective how that carbon is moving across and along the supply chain all the way to the consumers, and that companies like Procter & Gamble have accurate, verified data. And we are developing that platform at the moment.
Great. So that, I assume, is very helpful also for the companies to make sure, that that kind of figures are consistent, but that there's a comparison possible, and that also people can work together. And have you seen, in the context of what you're doing, that companies that are potentially traditional competitors, but that people are really coming together in the name of sustainability and trying to work on these issues together?
Yes, as I'm sure Virginie will share, this has now become a place for genuine collaboration. It's a pre-competitive space, because actually changing consumer behavior is one of those areas which is actually relevant for all brands. So there's plenty of opportunity, and collaboration is really so much part of the sustainability agenda.
Yeah. No, good. Okay, so Virginie, I want to come back to Ariel and kind of your plans. You had mentioned that there's a big announcement. There's your North Star. Can you tell us what that is, and where are things going with Ariel, which is used? And I just want to say this because I think it's really important that people. Ariel is used by 30 million households in Europe, right? So this is a huge brand, and we're really excited to actually have our announcement here today. Right, Virginie, I'm sorry, but you're on mute. Hang on just 1 second, and there you go. Thank you.
I am going to unveil that North Star. And as you may have guessed by now, it has something to do with climate change and carbon. So the North Star for Ariel is reinventing clean to decarbonize laundry at every step. That means, from the design to the manufacturing, the distribution, all the way to the consumer use and the end of life. And doing that whilst maintaining superior cleaning, which is very important, and you will understand why. And so to get to that North Star, there are several stepping stones. And the one that we are announcing today has to do with consumer engagement. It's a pan-European consumer engagement campaign. We call it Every Degree Makes a Difference, because it does. We've heard Heidi talk about it. And we are executing it with a partnership, a content partnership with National Geographic. I'll come back to this. So why am I so excited about this? Well, because as your viewers that are from Europe, as they do their laundry today, 60% of their carbon footprint is linked to the temperature of the cycle they choose, and which is basically the energy needed to heat the water. So that's 60%. And so when you turn down the temperature from 40 to 30, it's up to 35% energy saving. It's cumulatively across Europe, that would be 3.5 million tons of CO2 every year. That's about 2 million cars off the road, so that is impact. And so through this campaign, we are trying to make it, easy and rewarding for people to use lower temperature, because every degree makes a difference. So now I can hear some of your viewers say behind their screens, well, but that's all well and good, but is it just down to the people to do the work to lower their impact? And to that I say absolutely not, because do you know what is the biggest barrier for people to wash in cold? Well, it's the fear that the socks will not come out clean, or the spaghetti sauce stains will still be there, And so this is why we've been focusing for decades now, our innovation on Ariel, to improve performance in colder temperature. And now we are accelerating this development with this campaign, so that people can turn the dial confidently, knowing that their clothes will come out clean. So that's basically the downstream underpinning of our North Star. But there is also an upstream element to it in the supply chain, which is basically the materials, the ingredients, which represent another 20% of the carbon footprint. So it's not insignificant. And so we are looking at using responsibly sourced ingredients, less carbon intensive ingredients, because we know, for instance, that biosourced material, if done right, which means that there is no trade-off on land use or deforestation, those biosourced materials can reduce emission by 20 to 30%. Mm-hmm. So downstream, the cold water performance, upstream, the ingredient decarbonization, and all of this to ultimately decarbonize the process of doing laundry.
Yeah. No, I think that I want to go back to just what you said, because this was a big surprise to me, as I normally watch on 30, which I already felt good about when we had the discussion, but that the innovation and the technology that you've created with Ariel means that it doesn't make a difference in terms of the cleanliness of clothes if you wash on 40 or 30, or if you wash on cold. And that's
the idea, exactly, that you keep the performance. Otherwise, many people will not do it, and that's how we can enable the sustainable behavior. It's not just about educating and creating the awareness, it's about enabling it.
And that it works and that people really trust that. But I think that really requires, as we said, a big shift in the mentality of consumers, because I think there's very few people that do wash on clothes, or at least wash regularly on cold. And so I think that's a huge challenge, right, on all of the parts to how do you get that message out to consumers? Because once you have people who see that it works, that's great, but you have to have somebody who's going to try first. Absolutely. Right? And that's a big challenge. And I think that also comes back a bit to what you were saying, Cecilia, about the consumer education is how do you how do you work on that kind of a communication campaign, and how do you get the buy-in of your consumers?
So the first thing is that it's not new. You know, in the early 2000s, actually, I was marketing director on Ariel. That's also why I'm so passionate with the topic. And I developed the first campaign on cold water washing, which was called Turn to 30 at the time. And it was very successful. We went from very little, like below 10% of people washing in cold, to 38% by 2010. And in 2010, we decided to go further and to set a goal for the decade, so for 2020, that by 2020, 70% of all machine loads in the world will be done in low energy efficient cycles, which mean cold. And so this goal we achieved actually 1 year earlier in 2019. And just to give you an idea that this partnership with consumers on cold since 2015 has avoided 15 million tons of CO2, you know, 3 million cars off the road. And so the problem is now we are seeing a stagnation. You know, there has been great strides in lowering the temperature, but over the past couple of years, there is a stagnation. Temperature is starting to creep up. And so we need to reactivate our efforts. It's not something that is done forever, you know, because as new households come and you know, do the laundry for the first time. So you need to constantly educate. And so our goal with this campaign on Ariel, Every Degree Makes a Difference, is to lower by 5 degrees by 2025. And it's huge, you know, Heidi talks about 0.5 degree, that is a huge difference. I'm talking about 5, you know, 5 degree by 2025. And I think what's different today versus the time where I was on the brand is that people are now much more savvy about this whole thing. And also they demand more proofs to be convinced. And hence, you know, this partnership with National Geographic is very important. You know, we partner with them. We went to the Arctic and spend time with scientists who've been studying climate change and who are, and so we learn firsthand that why every degree makes a difference. So, you know, this is why we are encouraging people. So we are educating them. We are giving them the science. We are also encouraging them to pledge their own degrees. So you basically, you know, give away some of your degrees and they pledge, we donate to local NGOs. So showing how small actions can basically have extraordinary impact on this.
Yeah. And Cecilia, can I ask you, how is this working with Electrolux? Because you also talked a lot about this consumer education, ensuring that consumers know and that they have different options, right? In terms of their washing machine as well, because it makes a big difference if the kind of obvious thing is to wash on cold versus washing on hot, or washing in a more economic cycle than on a less economic one.
Yeah, I mean, you're right there. I think that we've been too much in love with our products in the past. I mean, that happens when you know a lot about laundry, right? Then you assume that everyone else knows a lot about laundry too. And it turns out they do, but everyone has their own opinion. And we, as I said, we pick up the knowledge from the previous generation. So we don't look at with a modern perspective, and we're not very invested. We want it to be done. We want to get a good result, as Virginie said, but we don't want to spend a lot of brain power getting involved in it. So what we have to do, and what we've realized the recent few years, is that we have to make it obvious. We have to make it obvious for the consumer when he or she is in the laundry room that this is what I'm going to use. We have to give signals back to the consumer that this is how you choose, this gives you a good result, and this gives you then a lower environmental impact as well. And I think connectivity is a great, for all of us, of course, but especially us in the household appliance business, that you can actually get a lot of feedback back to the user, but of course also back to us as a company, so we can actually evolve more quickly in our product development once we pick up, we understand what the consumer is doing, what they're thinking, and if they're actually picking up on the signals we're trying to send them through our user interfaces.
Yeah. No, because I feel like it's such a big challenge to have those messages be clear and be consistent, that it really needs to come from all sides, right? That certain things will touch certain people in different ways, but that needs to be a consistent message of changing habits and the way that we think about doing laundry, right? Which is something that I think you do so automatically, and you do so automatically exactly what you've seen in your own house, which was of course a different time. And we know that in terms of the level of innovation on the product side, on the washing machines, in terms of energy, et cetera. It's a very different universe now than that of our parents or our parents' parents and whoever was kind of that model. Okay, so I want to look kind of at the challenges that you all are facing now. So just beyond, I mean, I think this consumer part we've really talked about is a really important challenge, and also because particularly in laundry, a huge part of the carbon impact is on the consumer side, and that's not necessarily the case in all products, right? But in this one it is. But I think this achieving sustainability, and really achieving sustainability on an industry level, this is something that is an internal challenge in terms of companies themselves and changing the internal policies and the way that you all work. And it's also a coordination issue, right? And this is really kind of a challenge at the industry level. And so I would look at, maybe John, you can start with maybe bringing in some of your perspective here. I'd really like to say, what are the key challenges moving forward, right, on the consumer side, but also across the board? Is that how do you really make sustainability in products, and as companies, how does this work?
So, you know, I think Procter & Gamble are a great place to start when we talk about how to overcome the barriers. So I think setting an ambition is a great starting point. And with an organization like Procter & Gamble, there's no doubt that they have understood the challenge of what they need to do and their responsibility in it. So often one of the barriers is to make sure that companies really understand what their responsibility is. In the case of Procter & Gamble, my CEO sits on their senior advisory council, making sure that we are constantly helping and supporting them to understand where the ambition should be. And I also have the opportunity to do that with in the laundry detergents team as well. So I think that's a critical component, to have a company that is open and willing to listen to what needs to be done, and to listen to the hard challenges and hard questions. I think then we come back to this question of collaboration. So as Virginie explained, in terms of upstream, you know, the materials that are used to make laundry detergents, often these are common again across different brands. There is an opportunity for collaboration there. When we talk about in the North Star, what does laundry care look like in the future? What does clean look like? Some of that will require perhaps a change in the way that consumers buy detergents. What is that a service in the future? What does that mean for an organization like Electrolux? All that requires enormous opportunities for collaboration. And then when we start talking about the consumer habits, of course, the benefits that Virginie has as a campaign will flow through to consumers that buy a competitor product, but equally the campaigns that they're running will also benefit Procter & Gamble. So we constantly try to make the case that sustainability is a pre-competitive issue.
Yeah. No, and I mean, maybe it's also because I work in sustainability, but I feel like this is also, it's something that becomes very clear to companies, right? Like you have to be a responsible player. That's the name of the game now. And I think companies have been doing this and have been working on it for a while, but now is the time that there's more recognition and also more pressure, both internally and externally, to show concretely that what you're doing has a real impact.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there are companies that clearly want to demonstrate that they are managing and controlling the things that are within their responsibility. At some point, The opportunity to collaborate is because you realize that one company by itself cannot solve these things. And the work I talked about in terms of measuring carbon across the value chain is one of those challenges that one company cannot solve that by itself. And what we need is a consistent methodology, a consistent approach.
Yeah, no, good. Virginie, sorry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with everything that John said, but one thing. John said that sustainability is a pre-competitive issue. I think it's true, but not just. I think it's both pre-competitive and competitive. That's why it's so difficult to find the line. And I think the cold water example is a great example to explain what that means. We want to level the playing field and raise the bar at the same time. So that's the pre-competitive. We want everyone on the planet to wash in cold. And we can join forces to do that. Actually, 15 years ago, I was part of a group with our competitors developing an industry campaign on cold water. It was called I Prefer 30. It was a big first we went together to brief an agency. I mean, it's never seen before. So you level the playing field, but then as a competitive aspect, you need to make sure that you develop the product that works best in cold water. So, and it's good because if it's not a competitive issue, then it's being worked by the sustainability department as a separate track, and that's not what we want. We want this to be absolutely an integral part of your brand, your innovation, how you do business. So it's both. And I think one of the challenge to your question, Rhea, is making sure that you drive both at the same time, both sides of the brain need to advance progress on the pre-competitive aspect and the competitive aspect.
Virginie, thank you for saying that, because I do agree with you completely. And our members are so happy to work together and support the sustainability outcomes, because they know actually that will help their businesses to become more sustainable themselves.
Yeah. No, and I want to bring in a question now that we have from the audience that I think it touches on another topic, but this is a topic of measurement, right? And so the question is really relating to how you measure the decarbonization of your products and the research that you all have done in preparation of designing the sustainability strategies.
So decarbonization, as I said, has many aspects. And so we will measure separately each of them. So I talked about the 5 degrees in the use phase, very measurable. We go and do consumer research and we understand sometimes in connected house, so we can, even if they don't tell us, we know exactly, which temperature they use on their washing machine. On the ingredient side, we are working with our suppliers, like Novozyme, which is the supplier who developed for us the PureZyme, and PureZyme in this enzyme which allows the cold performance, of Ariel. So very, very important to, and it is biodegradable, and it is found in nature. So it's the type of ingredients that you want to advance the decarbonization of your ingredients. But that's how we work with our suppliers. And we know exactly what it's in the product, and that's the work that John is leading. Is actually how do you attribute a carbon metric, in your supply chain to your ingredients. So it's still, there are no standards. That's why the work that John is leading is so important, to have a standardized way to measure this in the supply chain. So we are doing it. We are working the roadmap and we'll have a very detailed roadmap in a year, and together with work that John is doing, we'll be able to have standard measurements, which is important, that we both, our suppliers, ourselves, are using the same measurement system.
Yeah, because now, just I want to make sure it's clear, is that the kind of the product life cycle kind of assessments that you all are doing now, those are Procter & Gamble's, right? Based on some standards and the science that's there, but it's for Procter & Gamble. And so then the idea of the work from John is that then becomes something that is more standardized across.
Yeah, so the life cycle assessment method that we are all using basically is fairly standard. Now the question is, what are the data you use for this life cycle assessment? Sometimes you use industry average modelization, What we are trying to do, and what John is driving, is to have primary data that are much more specific, and not average or industry data. So that's the next step, so that you are able to measure in a way that is much more accurate.
Okay, very good.
And just to add that, to perhaps make it easy for people joining to understand, you can't see and touch carbon dioxide, as Heidi will explain. So it's very easy to ask Electrolux how much water is used for a wash. But if you ask Heidi how much carbon is involved in that wash, it's more challenging. So we need consistent methodologies that are used across different parts of the value chain in order to have genuine primary data and to allow Virginie to really understand how far they're going on their carbonization journey, where opportunities remain, and how far they have performed already.
Yeah, because I imagine it's quite hard as an individual player to really have a view of where you stand vis-a-vis other folks in the market if you don't have that kind of real data on your own products and production. Okay. Cecilia, sorry, did you want to add something?
No, I actually you said it for me. The problem is that we can't compare ourselves in very many places. So it is really good that we get this kind of a neutral data from John, but also that more and more markets are bringing these kind of labeling systems into the picture as well. So the consumers are guided and consumers have something that's neutral instead of all the different brands, different claims. So all of this is moving in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's also really on the consumer side. I've said I always felt like I was very responsible with my laundry, doing 30 and buying organic, etc. And then we had this conversation and I thought, okay, wow, I feel like I'm a relatively conscientious consumer, and in basically everything that I buy, generally speaking, I really try. And I had no idea. Right. And so I think it's really important that these kind of metrics are available, that this information is available, and that there are challenges to get people really engaged in playing a role and in making that move to be more sustainable in our everyday acts.
And for us as a company, being involved with P&G as a company who are in 30 million homes in Europe, that is a big opportunity to actually educate and guide consumers. So it's great.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful. I'm really happy that that it's happening as a consumer. Okay, I want to shift a little bit and look forward, right? So now things are in a good place. It seems things are advancing. As Heidi mentioned, we have a lot of challenges to make things move very quickly and make these advances happen. So I want to talk about what are kind of your next steps. We have this North Star now. You've had this vision. What is it that you all see? If we talk in a year's time from now, what will be different? What will have been achieved? What are those primary goals and challenging?
So I can start on this one. I mean, very clearly in a year from now, we need to demonstrate that we are on track to lower the temperature in Europe, and that we are on track with this 5 degrees by 2025. So it will be, every year we will measure, we'll be able to say in a year from now if we're on or off, and we'll be on track. Linked to that, we need to have a heightened consumer understanding and awareness, I mean, to your point, Brea, that it matters, that so that they move out of this autopilot mode. When they get to their washing machine, they understand that at these very moments, this is a moment of truth, whereby just turning the dial, they can actually slow down the melting of the glacier that Heidi is studying. I mean, it has a very direct impact. And especially if they do it, their neighbor do it, and collectively we all do it. So that's what I want to see in 1 year. I also want to have, we just talked about it, the clear roadmap to decarbonize our ingredients. So have made progress on measurements, made progress on working with our suppliers on ingredient innovation. In a year from now, we'll have 100% of the Ariel packaging recyclable. That's our goal by 2022. So that's also important. I mean, packaging is also contributing to our carbon footprint. And I want to have really advanced on this idea of collaboration. I mean, it sounds maybe a bit trite, but you know, for companies like us, we have learned how to compete. You know, learning how to collaborate is a totally different thing. And you know, we want to be very humble on this journey. We are doing it with our suppliers. We are doing it within association like organization like WWCSD. But we need to move faster. You know, I think collaboration is the name of the game now. This is how we will win together. And we need to be bolder in how we partner, how we collaborate for a greater impact at scale.
Yeah. No, and I have a couple more questions from the audience that I want to bring in, because I think that some of them are, so one relates directly to this, which is, do you think the priority should be to educate consumers or to really focus on production on the value chain? And I just want to bring in the figures that you talked about after, which is that we didn't outline this exactly, right? But in your study of the value chain for the product of Ariel, that 60% of the impact is on the consumer side.
Yes, 20% is ingredient and the rest is manufacturing, packaging, transportation.
Exactly. So then for me, then, sorry, I'm going to answer the question, but I think then it's clear that that's a clear prioritization, is that the number one priority then is the consumer, but it is the consumer because of the impact that it has on carbon, right?
Now, it's also true to say that as the grid is greening, as more you know, renewable electricity is coming to the grid, relatively speaking, the ingredients are going to take more importance. Yeah. You know, so that's the reality. Like in France, for instance, you know, there is more nuclear energy, so the ingredients have more relative importance. But I think the answer is all of the above. There is no one thing. We need to do this, both and.
Yeah. Okay. And I have a question for you, Heidi, because everyone's very impressed by how happy you are and how enthusiastic you are and how hopeful you are, because the outlook doesn't look great, despite the advances on Ariel. And so what is your vision when you have talks like this and when you work with companies and you actually see these changes? How do you say positive? How do you say this is enough or it's not enough, and kind of keep the,
thank you for this question.
You can still make a difference?
Yeah, you know, I think you have two options when you see what's happening to the planet and to glaciers. You can sometimes be feared into actions, be paralyzed by what you see, because sometimes it seems just too big of a mountain to climb. But actually, if you look carefully, there are so many reasons to be excited for the future. And tonight, this is one of them, one of so many of them that are happening. And I still rarely get the occasion, the opportunity to interact with businesses and to really follow what's happening in the laundry industry. But look at what we've seen tonight. What we're seeing is an opportunity for 30 million households, if I'm correct, to have a solution in their everyday lives to make a difference without even really noticing. It's just, as we said, you know, turning the dial down and that's about it. And sometimes I find it quite difficult to explain to people, what can you do in your everyday life to make a difference? Well, now we have a solution. This is one of many, and let's pay attention to these solutions.
And that leads me actually into a very good next question, which is, okay, we turn down the laundry temperature, what's next? So on the consumer perspective, what else should we be doing to lower our carbon footprint? I think that's a very broad question, so maybe we keep it to the consumer goods, but what is it that we can do beyond that?
I give you a very rapid one. Use your dishwasher. Don't let it steal, believing that it's wasted so much water and energy, because we've calculated that as of 8 items, you know, you actually save water and energy running your dishwasher versus running your sink, you know, to wash your dishes by hand. So, and don't pre-rinse, you know, if you use our product, like Fairy dishwasher, moment of publicity here, well, you don't have to pre-rinse. You can skip the rinse and put the dishes directly in the dishwasher, and you save water. So people have to understand that they need to educate themselves on what are the simple things that we will help them. But, you know, it's not like, sometimes it's not intuitive. It can be counterintuitive like this. You can save water using your dishwasher.
Very good. And I have a question for you, Cecilia. Someone was saying, what if I have an old washing machine? Can I retrofit it? Does it still work? Can I still wash on cold?
Oh, I have to pass on that. I don't know. I don't think actually it's so much in the cycle as such. It's more in the detergent in this case. So I would think you can. It depends on how old, I guess. Our products are known to work from the 60s, so maybe maybe not one of those ancient ones, but a fairly modern one, I would say yes.
Okay. And any other, sorry, just to add to this question of what else should we be doing on the dishwasher, we have a very good answer. Do you have any other things that come to mind of, as consumers, what else can we do in our day-to-day?
Okay, in your shower is a water and energy sink. 10 minutes of shower, it's 100 liter almost. So have you thought of, when you apply your conditioner, you turn the shower water off? Simple things like just being conscious of how much water you spend in your home and how much electricity, as opposed to do the autopilot thing that we all do.
Yeah. We are building our whole strategy now around how consumers can care better for their food, right? Because we throw a lot of food away. So take better care of your food. Make sure that you taste it before you throw it away. Store it better, and make sure you store it at the right temperature. Virginie has given us guidance on the dishwasher as well, and the laundry or textile habits in general. Do you need the new clothes that you're buying? Fast fashion isn't a really great thing for the planet. So take care of your clothes in a gentler way. Keep them longer, love them longer. Those are very, very simple things that you can make a lot of difference with.
Yeah. No, and I think there's that comes to a good point, that also having, when you wash on cold, you also automatically are able to keep your clothes longer, right? Like this is a positive outcome also for your clothes and your ability not to have to put something away after a season because the elastic broke or whatever else has happened. And that this is a really important point, because we do live in a world of fast fashion, and that's what most people buy. And that's also a whole other topic of consumer behavior and things to be worked on. So, okay, I'm just saying that we have 5 minutes left. And so I wanted to give you each an opportunity to leave a parting word of encouragement, idea, anything that you would like to share with the audience before we sign off today. Virginie, do you want to start?
Yeah. I mean, I would summarize what we've said, and with the example of Ariel, to say that, if you have amazing innovation, consumer participation that needs to be part of it, and transformative collaboration with this like triangle that we could call the triangle of hope, everyone will have a smile like Heidi on their face, because we can be part of the solution, and we can really have an impact at scale.
Very good. John?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also on the positive side, right? As Heidi said, it's not too late. And I think the exciting thing with the questions you've read out shows how engaged consumers are these days. So, I would encourage consumers to know and understand more about the products they use and how they use them. Brands, are doing a much better job to share this information, and consumers should be challenging the brands. And on our side, we are helping and supporting those companies to transform. So, with some of the tools that we're putting in place, it was, I think, only 15 years ago that the Greenhouse Gas Protocol was created, that helped companies to understand its carbon usage within its own four walls. Now we're talking about what happens across the whole of the value chain, from the creation of the product to the way consumers use it. So this change is happening.
Yeah. And I'm so glad it's happening. It's really wonderful to see the kind of advances that are happening. And I think also change now is we're really trying to do this on a kind of global scale of looking at all of these issues and how can we really accelerate innovation and accelerate change and really move forward to a better world. Even the change over the last 3 years.
That is, I guess that's the virtuous cycle, is that consumers make higher demands. Companies like Procter & Gamble are responding because they understand that demand, and they will help accelerate that change because they know consumers will accept it.
Yeah. And I think seeing the kinds of alliances that are happening, and I don't know, the unusual alliances, let's say that's really a very encouraging sign to see. So Cecilia, can I bring you in here for your closing words?
I can only agree with what's been said. I mean, the past year has been a turmoil from us as a sustainability team in the company, having to sort of knock on everyone's door, educating people. Now all of our colleagues are coming back to us saying, hey, we have to do this. Why aren't we moving faster? My neighbors are asking, the newspaper is full, the financial analysts are talking about it. And I mean, let's face it, my senior management their work is being graded on how fast we move on climate and on other global sustainability challenges. So now the needle, I mean, it's very, very precarious times, but the needle is finally moving. So use your voice as consumers, because you teach yourself, so you're able to influence more if you actually teach yourself about these different topics, and don't be afraid to shout, because that's what we listen to.
Very good. And Heidi, can I conclude with you, because you bring the joy at the end of the conversation?
Oh, thank you. But I couldn't agree more with what has just been said. And I think it's very important that we celebrate all these steps that are being made towards sustainability. Sometimes it's too easy to point the finger at, what's not happening, what's too slow, what's too small, too little. But actually, we should applaud all these efforts made in the right direction. And, as I get to interact a lot with the youth, I'm thinking also about them and about the future we're leaving them. And I always tell them that the best cure against climate anxiety is climate action. And tonight we have another solution to make the change, to be the change. So let's do it.
Very, very well said. And I just want to add one little change now note on this front, because one of the things that we really want to do is exactly what we've been talking about, which is really talk about how can consumers understand in our day-to-day activities what really has an environmental impact, and what are the small changes that each one of us can make to have an impact. So during our upcoming summit at the end of May, we're going to have what's called an impact comparison, and it's really going to be looking at these sort of things on your day-to-day activities. What are all of those little changes that you can make, the small decisions? And it really gives you an idea of some of the things that like laundry, that you wouldn't necessarily think have a significant impact, and they do. And so it's really designed to give some perspective on that for us. Well, I was going to say us as consumer versus companies, but it's not true, because every company is also full of consumers, right? So it's us as individuals, as how can we contribute to the sustainability goals, and making sure that Heidi's glaciers stay those glaciers. All right, thank you all very, very much. I'm really, really happy to have shared this moment with you all today. And I hope that this reaches a whole lot of people, and that we see even more people really changing their habits, and that we see these advances continuing to happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.